member Nancy here. In every other episode of Cruising America's Waterways, you've seen me working and having fun as a crew member while we travel on our own boat from port to port, enjoying the beauty of the water and the interesting attractions along our route. Well, this program is a little different. I'm not a crew member, I'm a passenger. And as for Captain Mark, who needs him? We have Captain Mercer. And my co-crew member, John, well, he really wasn't needed because for the next 10 days, we're cruising on a big ship that has its own crew and just about anything else you could ask for. Our cruise begins in Montreal and takes us to Quebec City, the Saguenay Fjord, Ingonish, Sydney, and Halifax, Nova Scotia, Bar Harbor, Boston, Newport, and New York. We'll discover beautiful places, interesting people, and a ship that's a destination unto itself, where we'll get to go behind the scenes, only to discover that everyone who travels by water shares the same joys and the same challenges. We set sail from Montreal late in the afternoon, heading down the St. Lawrence to Quebec. Of course, there really weren't any sails to set. We were on a motor ship, the MS Viandam. We awoke at the pier the next morning, ready to go exploring. In every port, there are opportunities to select transportation and go sightseeing on your own, or to travel on one of the many escorted tours, each with its own itinerary. In fact, the Old City was just a short walk from the ship. But I began my day with a tour of a park on the outskirts of town. Just east of Quebec City is La Chute Montmorency, which is Montmorency Falls. This was originally a source of hydroelectric power in Quebec. Today, it's a tourist attraction and a beautiful one indeed. At the top of the falls, which is 1.5 times the height of Niagara Falls, is the Manoir. There are a couple of ways to get there. You can either take a cable car, or if you're feeling adventurous, you can try the stairs. They'll take you up to the top, into the park, and over to the Manoir. The Manoir Montmorency was originally built in the 1700s. It was a Palladian-style home for the governor, and today it contains a restaurant and an interpretation center. I am sur le pont, that's on the bridge over the Montmorency Falls, and that roar you hear is 85,000 liters a second of water passing over the falls. And way down there, you can see someone fishing. And I understand they've caught salmon here. I returned to the old city of Quebec with its historic architecture and quaint streets lined with cafes and boutiques. Founded in 1608, today Quebec City is recognized as a heritage city by UNESCO. This is for two reasons. One is that it's the cradle of French civilization here in North America, and the other is it's one of just a very few fortified cities in North America. Now, by fortified, we mean that a wall passes around a portion of the city. In this case, the city is also defended by water. Now, through this wall passed 3 gates. These gates were originally much more narrow, and it was thought at one time that they would be destroyed to let traffic pass through. But a visionary decided it would be easier to widen them and keep them to allow for modern traffic. Our next stop is a visit to a glassblower studio. Now, this particular glassblower qualifies with the province of Quebec as something called an économisé. It's a kind of a combination sales shop and demonstration studio. And he'll get special funding from the government because he not only sells his wares in his shop, but he'll also show us exactly how they're made. Within walking distance of where our ship is docked, we found Old Port. This is the original harbor for the city. And today it contains a marina, and you can see that behind me. There's a path where you can bike and run, and a farmer's market. The city has many fine museums, including the Museum of Civilization, which has this special exhibition gallery presently highlighting what else? Hockey. There are also permanent exhibits tracing the cultural development of Quebec. Nearby is the Museum of Quebec, which houses paintings, drawings, sculpture, and ornamental gold and silver pieces. Quebec City is divided into two parts, the lower town where we are now and the upper town. To get to the upper town, you can walk up one of many escaliers or staircases, or if you'd rather take the easy way out, you can ride the funicular. It's just kind of an elevator that takes you up there and leads you to the promenade of the Frontenac Hotel. Just over here to my left, you can see our boat, our ship, waiting in dock for us. We'll be sailing tonight, but not before we visited the upper town. This is the spectacular Chateau Frontenac. It dominates the entire skyline of Quebec City. In fact, you can't be anywhere in the area and not see this beautiful building. Construction of the hotel began in 1893. It was named after the Count of Frontenac, who was the governor of New France. There are more than 600 rooms, restaurants, and bars. Guests have included Winston Churchill and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This beautiful park is known as the Plains of Abraham. In 1759, it was the site of a decisive battle between the British and the French for supremacy here in Canada. Today, newlyweds love to come and have their picture taken in any one of these picturesque spots, and you'll love to visit this park too. Our ship is 720 feet long and over 100 feet in breadth. It rises 160 feet above the water with a draft of 25 feet. Its cruising speed is 20 knots, or about 23 miles per hour. There are 13 decks that house the 1,500 passengers and more than 600 crew members. During our 10-day voyage, we'll consume over 6 tons of meat, about 30,000 eggs, and 30 tons of fruits and vegetables. Welcome to my cabin. I'll give you a brief tour. I cleaned it up specially for you. It's a very comfortable bed, has bedside tables and storage beneath them, individual reading lamps. You've even got music that you can turn off and on right from the comfort of your bed, as well as, of course, controls for your remote controls for your television. Now, in here, this is the salon part of your cabin, and you've got a couch. You have a television and VCR with, as I mentioned before, a remote control. You have a bar, which is constantly replenished. Also constantly replenished is our ice bucket. This is one of the wonders of traveling aboard this ship, that the ice bucket is never empty. It's attended by your cabin steward, as is everything else in your cabin. The cabin steward just kind of mysteriously appears and disappears and makes sure that everything is always looking nice and tidy, and in fact puts a little chocolate on your pillow before you turn in at night. Now, we've also got in here a refrigerator, which is stocked with sodas and wines and other goodies that you might like to have during the day. In fact, one of the things you might like to do is take a piece of fruit on a nice plate with a napkin, maybe even your fresh flowers, and step out here with your glass of wine to the veranda, where you can sit and enjoy the day and enjoy the scenery no matter what the weather. You've got deck chairs, a table, and a beautiful way to watch the world go by. Everyone returns to the ship at 4:30 for the next leg of our journey, the 140-mile evening cruise to the Saguenay Fjord. We were given a special opportunity to take you behind the scenes on the bridge of the MS Viandam as we departed Quebec. Canadian pilots, familiar with these waters, were brought on board to assist the crew, who quickly familiarized them with the ship's equipment and characteristics.
Very maneuverable, nothing to worry about in this wind. 2 bow thrusts, each of 2,400 horsepower each, so 4,800 total.
While the river pilots provided navigation, our captain was still responsible for the overall operation of the vessel as master of the ship.
Last time we anchored off Point de Pique for a few hours, so I'd like to do that again tonight. And that gives everybody a little sleep and some rest.
I anticipated that there would be a flurry of activity on the bridge just prior to departure. There wasn't. Everyone simply attended to their specialized area of responsibility.
Yeah, as long as she turns fast.
Oh yeah, you'll see 2 degrees, she'll take off.
The captain completed his briefing, and the countdown to departure was right on
The
schedule.
instrumentation. Twin rudders, hence twin indicators, a clock, an inclinometer, and a relative wind speed in knots. And our engines are on standby, and our men are at harbour stations. We shortly let go our lines and depart Quebec. Enjoy the sail away, and I wish you a very pleasant evening on board. Thank you. Out of port. Yes, go for it.
At first light, our ship hoisted anchor and began cruising the Saguenay Fjord, created by the Saguenay River, which empties into the St. Lawrence. Glaciers created the Saguenay Fjords, the largest in eastern North America. The area's towering cliffs include Cape Trinity and its statue of the Virgin Mary, erected here in 1881. It took 10 people a week to transport and install the 1,000-pound pine statue. The statue was the gift of a merchant who believed that the Virgin Mary saved his life when he and his horse-drawn sleigh fell through the ice into the river. The point where the Saguenay River meets the St. Lawrence is a rich feeding ground for beluga, humpback, pilot, minke, and blue whales, who come to feed each year from July to September. Passengers began to gather on the forward deck, hoping to see whales and seals as the captain purposely slowed the ship.
But I've been at sea it's my 30th year. I joined when I was an apprentice, 5 years old.
5 years old.
Yes, obviously my prime responsibility is the safety of the passengers, the crew and the ship. And then from there on in, it's to make sure that all our guests experience what they have come to expect from cruising, or are expecting, because some are first-time cruisers. I've also got to ensure that my owners get a return on their huge investment for the ship. And then the remainder of it is administration, a lot of administration, a lot of PR work as such on a cruise ship in particular, father confessor to some, disciplinarian to others. It's an all-encompassing role. It could be described really as a ship manager. There are 3 departments on the ship: the hotel department, which has the hotel manager as its department head, the deck department with the chief officer, and the technical department with the chief engineer, and they're all quite capable men of looking after their own departments. And my role is to oversee that and also to communicate with them on the everyday running of the ship. The technology is changing constantly. One will find invariably, even when a ship is new, it's rather like buying a computer in fact, when the ship is new, by the time it's actually working and launched, the equipment on it is outdated. Well, the next generation has come along. I mean, this equipment we've got is very, very good, but it's rather like you take your computer home and somebody's got a better one the next day. At the end of the day, despite all this you see in front of you, you still don't forget looking out of the window is the most important factor. These are all with the emphasis on the aids. The basic seamanship hasn't changed much, but the ships themselves are.
What made you pursue this path for yourself?
I'm often asked that question, and I can't tell you. I haven't got any past family at sea. Some people say it was to get away from my mother, but I don't know. But I haven't regretted a minute of it. It's the best thing I ever did. I wake up in the morning and still look forward to it. So there's no rush hour, no jumping in a car to get here.
on the bridge of the Viandam where we're 110 feet above the water, so we've got a great view. We're coming out of the fjord, the Saguenay Fjord, and we're coming back into the St. Lawrence where the whales like to hang around and feed, so we're watching for them. We've seen a beluga, and in fact, there's 2 or 3 of them off to my left right now.
The Canadian government watches people watching the whales to protect both the whales and the onlookers. But mostly the whales, I think. Leaving the whales behind, we'll make the 563-mile voyage to Ingonish.
So we found these top seats so we can film at first. Cheap seats. I mean, the best seats. The best seats.
We've just come aboard what's called a tender. In this case, the tender also serves as a lifeboat, or the lifeboat serves as a tender, but in many ports, the water's too shallow for the ship to actually dock. Whoa! So we get on this smaller boat that takes us into the port. And where we're going today is a town called Ingonish. And Ingonish is on Cape Breton Island, which is part of Nova Scotia.
Here. Now the trick is finding out if you can walk on land again. You get used to walking on the ship when it's moving, and this should be an interesting experiment.
Well, our ship, which we've left behind out there in the water, is going to sail around the island and meet us in Sydney, which is where our bus tour is going to also take us, but we have a lot of stops along the way.
It's been said that Cape Breton is the soul of Nova Scotia. We came upon this cable ferry at Englishtown, where we crossed St. Anne's Bay.
We're on Cape Breton Island, and I could tell you a lot of facts and figures about the island, that it's 4,000 square miles, 175,000 people of mixed cultural heritage, and there's a lot of Scots, there's a lot of Irish, and there's a strong American Indian population, but really the view behind me says a lot more than I could ever say, so just take a look.
Bedeque is located on the northern shore of the Bredor Lake, the largest saltwater lake in the world. This is a great boating destination, where the tradition is that you can dock anywhere there is a dock. The summer population quadruples to almost 4,000.
One of the joys of any kind of travel is an opportunity to see and maybe collect some of the artwork that you find along the way. In this particular gallery, we're looking at Nova Scotia artists, and right now, Nova Scotia art is highly collectible. You not only can have an opportunity to choose some artwork here, but you can also find out more about the artist who created it.
The Alexander Graham Bell Historic Site is here in Bedeque, where he spent much of his life. He once said, "I have traveled the globe. I have seen the Canadian and American Rockies, the Andes and the Alps, and the Highlands of Scotland. But for simple beauty, Cape Breton outrivals them all." Bell had a 59-foot sailboat built as a wedding gift for his daughter, Elsie, in 1917. The boat, Elsie, has been in continuous operation since and is available for charter.
The city of Sydney was founded in the mid-1700s by Loyalists who fled New York, and later some Scottish Highlanders joined them. The harbor of Sydney, which we see here now, has been active for visiting steamships and cargo ships for years, and today has 3 yacht clubs and a marina which is under extensive development. You can right now not only enjoy a boardwalk, but also shops and restaurants all along the way.
When we boarded the ship in Sydney, local dancers and musicians were entertaining passengers in the theater. Our next port of call was Halifax, Nova Scotia, 249 miles from Sydney.
While you're in Halifax, make sure you take the time to relax and unwind in Halifax's public gardens. They're downtown, they're free of charge, and they are the finest Victorian gardens in North America. This oak tree is something you should stop and see while you're in the Halifax Public Gardens. It was planted here in 1939 by His Majesty King George VI in the presence of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth.
We next visited the downtown Maritime Museum of the Atlantic, with its fascinating exhibits on seafaring history, from colonial times to the present.
And in this case is the actual chair that survived the Titanic disaster, intact except for having been recaned. And above the chair is a quote that in itself tells a story. One of the crewmen assured one of the passengers that God himself could not sink this ship. The rest of that story is history. By now, most of us are familiar with the name Jack Dawson from the movie Titanic. He was the hero of that movie. Well, it just so happens that here in Fairview Cemetery, there is a J. Dawson buried among the 121 bodies recovered and buried in this cemetery after that disaster. Well, this happens to be James Dawson, not Jack Dawson. Still, many people come and visit this particular gravestone and leave mementos.
3 Halifax ships helped recover 209 victims of the April 15, 1912 tragedy. 1,200 others were lost at sea forever on that terrifying and frigid North Atlantic night to remember.
While you visit Halifax's Fairview Cemetery to see the Titanic memorials, you'll also find a variety of memorials to people who lost their lives in Halifax's harbor explosion of 1917.
This photograph at the Maritime Museum shows how the city was leveled by the blast. The star-shaped British citadel overlooks the city of Halifax and was built to protect the harbor. Halifax is one of the world's largest harbors, with the modern metro transit moving people between homes and shopping, cultural, recreational, and dining destinations. At a very civilized City Hall, the mayor provides afternoon tea to visitors during the summer.
Well, that's it for part 1 of Cruising America's Waterways Big Ship Adventure. And we've had a great time on this trip because as crew members, we've really got to relax and enjoy things. We haven't had a lot of work to do, but we've certainly seen a lot of sights, gone a lot of places, and eaten a lot of food. And we've got another week of it to come. So be with us again next week for more of our Big Ship Adventure on Cruising America's Waterways.
Crew member Nancy here. In our last program, you found me relaxing as a passenger, not a crew member, on a very large ship traveling from Montreal to New York City. We visited wonderful ports along our route, and we got to see some behind-the-scenes activities on the ship and meet its crew. But we're far from finished, so come aboard as the adventure continues with stops including Bar Harbor, Boston, and Newport before reaching our final destination. And we'll go behind the scenes again to see how big ships and small boats and the people who run them have a lot in common.
We're coming in here to Bar Harbor, Maine. This is a beautiful spot from everything I can see right now. And while we're in Bar Harbor, we'll be visiting Acadia National Park. We'll go to the Jordan Pond House for lunch, and we'll chat with a lobsterman. We'll be tendered in from here since the harbor isn't deep enough for the boat to dock.
On Cadillac Summit, you're 1,532 feet above sea level. That makes Cadillac the highest point of land directly on the eastern seaboard from here all the way down to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. If you're on Cadillac Summit between October and March, you'll be the first person in the continental United States to see the sunrise. You can hike, you can boat, you can enjoy lakes and ponds, you can enjoy the open ocean. The reason why I find Acadia extremely attractive is the diversity. There's just so many different types of environments that you can explore here on the island. In 1929, when we acquired the last third of Schoodic Peninsula, which is across Frenchman Bay, we changed the name to Acadia National Park. This was the first park east of the Mississippi River, and it was the first park made up entirely of donations of land.
Acadia National Park is known as the place where the mountains meet the sea, and that certainly is true. If you look behind me, you'll see classic Maine seacoast with one slight difference. Maine isn't typically known for its sandy beaches, but here in Acadia National Park, you've got that too. Yes, it's cold.
One of Acadia's most popular attractions is Thunder Hole. For more than 100 years, visitors to Acadia have enjoyed dining indoors or on the lawn of the Jordan Pond House, where popovers with butter and jam and homemade ice cream are traditional fare. Prior to 1918, Bar Harbor was the village of Eden. Today's Bar Harbor is a tourist paradise.
Well, I'm here in Bar Harbor, Maine, and I stopped at Ben and Bill's for an ice cream cone, and I couldn't decide between moose droppings and lobster, so I got them both. Here in Bar Harbor, Maine, obviously one of the main activities is fishing, so we thought, why not talk to a fisherman? In this case, we're talking to a lobsterman.
I was on my way to college, and a little boat came for sale, and I decided, no, I think I'd rather do this, and this is where I've been for 28 years.
A recreational fisherman will go out for all kinds of fish. Can they also go out for lobster?
We have a recreational license here in the state. It's a 5-trap license. You can only fish 5 traps. You cannot sell the lobsters. You can only, what lobsters you take, you can only use for your own, have for your own use.
And how many traps do you have out?
Well, I fish 800 myself.
Are they widespread or in a pretty...
Yes, they cover a large area, yeah.
How do you identify good fishing ground?
Well, trial and error.
Does this handle rough water pretty well?
Yeah, it's a pretty good boat. Yeah, it does well.
You're not scared when it gets...
Well, if I get scared, I come home. If we catch a lobster in this one, I'll show you.
Wow.
Well, we're lucky.
Oh
We've
my
got
gosh.
some. This one's too little to keep. Now this female lobster, see that tail?
Yep.
That one right there? If there's
yeah.
anything wrong with that tail,
Right there.
There's just the slightest little nick. That, I'll re-notch that. A lot of people wouldn't, but I'll re-notch that lobster and I'll release her. And she's protected. Nobody can have her.
So she can go ahead and breed more lobster.
She can breed more lobster. We have this tool right here.
I like that.
And we'll just put it on her tail like that. Now she's protected.
So a responsible fisherman's going to be sure not to bring in that lobster.
Yeah, well, if anyone got caught with that lobster right now, they'd be in violation and they'd have to go to court. But most of the fishermen do what I just did because this is our livelihood.
Right.
This is the future of the business. That whole area will be like full of eggs, just covered with them. And as you can see, there's the crusher claw, there's the pincher claw.
Because the crusher's got big, heavy.
Right. And you can also feel this lobster, she's just shed. Push easy on her side, you can see.
Oh, sure, she's soft.
Quite soft. So.
Beautiful. Can I throw her back?
Sure.
Okay. Go on back and make babies.
She's gone.
We tendered back to our ship, where passengers enjoyed the setting sun as we departed. The seas were calm, and the view from my balcony was breathtaking. I decided I would visit the ship's lounge, where different live entertainment is presented nightly. The next morning, the fog lifted as we arrived in Boston, the cradle of American independence, 184 miles from Bar Harbor.
We're on the water ferry. This is a unique form of transportation here in Boston. It's run by the same folks who run the T, that's public transportation in the city of Boston. It runs every 15 minutes and it'll take you between Charlestown, the aquarium, even to the airport. At only $1 and running as often as it does, it's a great way to commute.
Boston's inner harbor mixes both commercial and pleasure boating traffic, providing easy access to waterfront attractions.
Here in Boston's Naval Shipyard, we went aboard the USS Constitution, where we talked with Seaman Campo and found out more of the proud history of this 200-year-old battleship.
Constitution was built right across the harbor here in Boston, Massachusetts in 1794. Constitution is a 54-gun frigate. Originally, she was sketched to be a 43-gun frigate, but she actually has 54 guns. It takes a crew of 9 to 14 men to man these cannons. Constitution is a 3-masted square-rig ship. Constitution's beam, which is her width, is 46.5 feet, and from billet head to taffrail, or from all the way in the front to the back end of the ship, is 204 feet long. The actual complement of men anytime during 1812 to 1815 would actually be about 450 to 500 men on board the ship. She was involved in 3 major wars. One of those wars, the War of 1812 against the British. This is where Constitution got her nickname of Old Ironsides, and also it's what made the United States a naval superpower. In one of the battles against one of the British ships named the HMS Guerriere, Guerriere's sailors were shooting cannonballs at Constitution's sides, and in turn those cannonballs were bouncing off her sides. And this is where Constitution gets her nickname Old Ironsides, which she still holds today. Being that I am a sailor on board and serving here, I feel that it's the greatest honor that a sailor can be given if they're a member of the United States Navy.
Close to the waterfront is one of Boston's most famous landmarks, Faneuil Hall. In the old days, it was the site of the original Boston Tea Party meeting. Today, it's the center of a bustling marketplace where visitors can find anything and everything, from great seafood to fresh flowers, fruits and vegetables, to clothing and souvenirs of all kinds.
How you doing, son? Ben Franklin. Where you from?
Every year, a variety of street performers audition, hoping to be selected to entertain visitors to the marketplace. Roaming musicians, singers, acrobats, jugglers, clowns, and mimes provide more than 2,000 performances.
The 187,000-gallon New England Aquarium is another must-see if you dock in Boston.
We spotted some unusual pink tour vehicles, and reporter that I am, I had to get the story.
And we're all set here. Okay. Hang on, here we go. We almost got some water up there, huh?
Almost. Almost.
You succeeded.
All right. See these buoys over here to the left that say anger, they're supposed to say danger, but somebody keeps throwing out, taking the D's off on us.
So what exactly is the concept?
Well, we use a World War II amphibious vehicle known as a duck. It was originally DUKW, which was a code name, which seemed to be appropriate, so you know, land and water. And we give an historically narrated tour about Boston. And we tried a new format of trying to make it the tour about freedom, fun, and first.
And it's about a 90-minute round trip?
And the average is about 80 minutes, about 50 minutes on land and about a half an hour on water.
And you have, how many of these are?
We have 16 of them, and we'll carry around 400,000 people this year. You know, a lot of people, and really the whole time I thought I was crazy.
You have no problem quacking?
Oh no, quack, quack, quack.
10 billion. Now, we're going to give you the whole Back Bay project here.
Never. Never. And this is what really was part of my whole vision, is that this is just an incredible panoramic view.
This is what took 40 years.
You can't get from the harbor of Boston, you can only get from the Charles, and it really wasn't accessible by water to the average person.
Now, does everybody play off the whole duck thing?
It's the thing that I'm most proud of, that I was a catalyst for, not that it was my idea, because Boston was not known as a friendly place. And now you have people interacting, and they're quacking each other, quacking and waving. And I don't know how else you can kind of say. I mean, it's just sort of like, you know, when you quack and wave, it's a friendly thing. It's, you know, it's fun and a quack, quack, quack,
We got to visit the ship's control room, where all of the electrical and mechanical systems are monitored.
Can't help but wonder, especially the first time you move, is how big are the propellers?
Okay, we have two propellers, one on the port side, one on the starboard. The propeller diameter is 18 feet, and there are 4 blades on each of the propellers.
Next, we headed below decks to the engine room.
Down here, as you say, we've got a bit of everything. I've got main propulsion units, diesel generators, alternators, air conditioning systems, sewage systems, firefighting systems, refrigeration systems, you name it, it's all down here. Behind us here is what we call a propulsion motor. A lot of this type of ship is referred to as diesel electric propulsion. Typically, they run at 140 revs. At the propellers are what we call CPP propellers. So the maneuvering of the vessel is done by changing the pitch on the propeller blades. We want to go ahead, the pitch is altered one way. We want to stop, they are altered another. And that way we can keep these propulsion motors running all the time. We're going to pass through a watertight door. It's a safety feature. Every passenger ship is got vertical compartments which extend vertically upwards above the waterline of the vessel, such that in the event of flooding of a particular compartment, we can isolate them. On a sea passage, I would typically burn 100 tons of fuel a day. In port, it's a little bit less. This area here is basically an area where we store our freshwater services room. I have a capacity freshwater of 2,200 tons. This piece of apparatus here is the sprinkler tank. It's part of the fixed firefighting system for the accommodation purposes. We have 3 thrusters on the ship. 2 of them are forward, 1 of them is aft. And they give us that maneuverability for in port. It's not very often you'll see a tugboat alongside a cruise ship because we just don't need them unless there's adverse weather conditions. But they give us that capacity to come off the berth in a horizontal motion.
After touring the engine room, I returned to my cabin, where the news on my television wasn't what I wanted to hear.
These are the remnants of Hurricane Bonnie, now Tropical Storm Bonnie, continuing to bring rainfall to Cape Cod and up through Maine on into Nova Scotia. We expect the storm to accelerate now off to the northeast later today as this trough of low pressure continues to push eastward. That should go ahead and shove it offshore.
Cruising is turning out to be quite an adventure, one that we're certainly enjoying, maybe more of an adventure than we anticipated. It turns out that Hurricane Bonnie is a little bit south of us, and so as our captain has put it, due to inclement weather and high swells, we will change our scheduled itinerary and not set sail for Newport, Rhode Island tonight. Instead, we'll stay docked here in Boston, where things are a little bit more calm, and then head out directly for New York tomorrow. But that's all part of the adventure of cruising.
Newport is a seaport on an island that shares Narragansett Bay and Rhode Island Sound, that's famous for its sailing, jazz festival, and mansions. This is the place where the legendary palaces of the Gilded Age remain a lasting tribute to America's early, wealthy businessmen and women.
Welcome to Beechwood, Mr. and Mrs. William Backhouse Astor Jr.'s home. My name is Miss Eliza Dunwell. I'm a housemaid here at the Astor's home. When you step through the doors of Beechwood, you will step back in time to the year 1891, and you will encounter all sorts of family and friends of Mr. and Mrs. Astor. We can answer any questions you might have. See, I'm a bit clairvoyant. I was unfortunately hit on the head with a candlestick by Mrs. Lightfoot a few years ago. She thought I was a burglar. It was a terrible mess, but I've been able to see the future ever since. I suppose it was worth something. Well, that also includes the Titanic incident of 1912. You see, Mr. and Mrs. Astor's youngest son, John Jacob IV, did perish on that ship, and well, he has several good years left. We wouldn't want to ruin the rest of his life by telling him that in advance, now would we? Well, a bit about the home before we begin. It was built in 1851, actually not for the Astors at all, but for a plantation owner by the name of Daniel Parrish. Mr. and Mrs. Astor didn't purchase the home until 10 years ago, in 1881, when Mr. Astor purchased it as an anniversary gift for his wife. Quite a lovely anniversary gift, if I do say so myself. For $190,000, and since that time Mrs. Astor has done $2 million herself worth of renovations and additions to the home. Well, if you step right this way, we just simply ask that before we begin you not sit on any of the furniture. Mrs. Lightfoot, the housekeeper, does like to keep things a bit neat and tidy. But if you brought your camera boxes, feel free to take all the pictures you like. Mrs. Astor does delight herself in her home, and she'd be quite proud of it. If you do take pictures, though, make sure you don't leave any flash powder lying about. It'd make quite a mess. Well, if you step right this way, I can just show you in.
Newport is often chosen to host both national and international sailing events. Of course, powerboaters are welcome too. This is one town where you don't have to search for the waterfront. It's everywhere and lined with boats. The wharves, many dating back to the 1700s, once serving commercial fleets, now offer visitors dockage, shops, restaurants, boat tours, and streets that are fun to wander. Bed and breakfasts, and the oldest operating eatery in America, dating from 1687, the White Horse Tavern, welcome tourists to a unique touch of America's history. We visited IRIS, the International Yachting Restoration School, which is located in a converted power plant on the waterfront. Here, students learn basic woodworking skills as a part of an academic program that prepares them to restore old boats and build new boats from the keel up. Not bad. Newport's Museum of Yachting, housed in an early 19th century building, includes exhibits featuring classic boats, historic artifacts, and memorabilia. There's an outdoor in-water collection as well, and the much-loved two-time America's Cup defender, the 12-meter US-26 Courageous, is moored in front of the museum.
During a cruise, you get an opportunity to dress up and go to a formal dinner in the dining room 2 or 3 times. This is our final formal dinner, and as I understand it, it's going to be a very special one, where the chefs pull out all the stops and do some of the finest cooking that they've done on the entire cruise, including what I hear called the Parade of the Baked Lobsters.
We do about 700 main courses, appetizers, desserts, you name it, in like an hour. In an hour. But we have to prepare for second sitting also. Second sitting, it's another 700. It's a lot of calories.
Yeah.
But you can all take them home duty free. So that's the good part. It's actually a mix. It's French, it's American, it's continental. Up here in New England, we do a lot of seafood. Crab, lobsters, salmon, halibut.
So you adjust the menu to suit the cruise?
That is correct. You afraid of lobster?
No.
They're pretty.
A big guy.
They're nice and fresh and firm.
Yeah.
So you take one and then we take another one.
And what do I do? Break them in half?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, and then you just go like this.
It's embarrassing me. I'm really not doing this right. Wait.
As our voyage came to a close, we passed under the Verrazano Narrows Bridge and past the Statue of Liberty that represents so much to so many of us and to so many immigrants who passed this way long ago. The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center came into view, and Captain Mercer kept a keen watch as we traveled up the Hudson River, passing many marinas along the way. The Empire State Building drifted by as passengers gathered on deck to enjoy the skyline. We passed the aircraft carrier Intrepid, now an exhibit open to the public. Slowly, we maneuvered into our berth in New York City with a new appreciation of the joy that is cruising.
We hope you've enjoyed these last 2 episodes of Cruising America's Waterways on the big ship as much as we have. We've covered a lot of miles and seen a lot of beautiful sights and met some wonderful people. And we'll be back with you again next week as we continue to cruise America's waterways.